leaders need to make decisions, and it's not always going to be the right decision, but once the decision's made, you need to go with it. You can't be in this paralysis mode regularly. So, I mean, that was something I learned as a teenager, and probably one of the most formative lessons ever. Also, because I was kind of in the wrong at the moment too, but I learned from the.
That's when we learned the
Yeah, I learned far more from my mistakes than my successes. And then, every supervisor, every partner, everybody has really great pearls of wisdom along the way if you're listening and open to that, and you file that away.
Well, welcome to the podcast. Today we have a very special guest. We have Chief Marc Goudie from Frontnac Paramedics. Marc has been an amazing leader and trailblazer in paramedicine, and we're very excited to talk to him today about paramedicine leadership and education. With your extensive experience in paramedicine leadership, what do you believe are the key qualities that make an effective paramedic leader in today's healthcare landscape?
Sure, great question, and thank you very much. That's very generous introduction. I think probably one of the biggest things is communication and being able to talk to a variety of folks on different matters. So when you think about paramedic leaders, they have a very broad audience, whether they're talking to frontline paramedics, other leaders within the organization, the paramedic organization, as well as, counties and municipalities, whoever they work with, council, the general public, allied agencies like the hospitals or base hospitals. So really being able to engage people at whatever level they're at, whatever information they need. I think that's probably one of the biggest things, and keeping people informed of what's going on. And that's probably one of the biggest things that I've noticed starting into this role is trying to provide that communication and that information going out to staff. They very much appreciate it. And I think it's been eye-opening to them about what's going on, right? And if they know what's going on, nobody's starting rumors or speculations before sending out regular updates to staff. It wasn't unusual to hear from people, oh, I heard this is going on. And they're like, oh, that's interesting because I haven't heard that. So I think communication is a big one. Otherwise, I think leaders need to have a really good sense of their personal values and how they apply to leadership. And one of those personal values, I think, if you're going to be a leader, almost has to be integrity. Leaders need to act, with integrity as a main focus pretty much all the time. And it takes a lot to build up to be thought of as an integral leader, but it's only a moment in time for all that to just go quick in an instant. Otherwise, self-reflection, I think, is another big one for leaders. You're not going to do everything right all the time as a leader. Probably not even close, but it's about self-reflecting about that. And, sometimes you might have to go back to a person if, Jacob and I have a poor interaction and I might think about it later. You might have to go back to Jacob and be like, hey, I was thinking about our conversation the other day, and, I don't think that really went as well as it probably could have. And, apologize, say I'm sorry, and try again. And I've done that with our staff. And, one of the most memorable times was, I kind of thought that in the moment. And they said, I knew you were going to come back the next day and tell me, apologize and say, this is where I wanted to go rather than not. So it's just a normal, regular practice of self-reflection. And I think probably one of the, there's lots that make up a leader, but the next one would be lifelong learning. I don't think once you attain a certain level, whatever you're aiming for, your learning stops. If anything, that's where your learning begins, right? Once you start into a new level, whatever that is, whatever you're doing, especially as a leader, that lifelong learning needs to continue, and in whatever facet. We're not going to be perfect ever. It's like pushing a rock up the hill, right? It's not going to get there.
There's so much good pearls in there. Because I always think about this quote, and you both can, brothers are like teaching. Imagine trying to shoo your kids out of the house. You're having a stressful morning with the family, and you got to come in and be the professional. You may have shorter patience and time and everything. As a chief, you got 200 employees to deal with, and you may be lack of patience sometimes, but it just demonstrates your values. It's like, I always self-reflect and I'll take accountability. It's like, listen, I was wrong the other day, but this is how I'm going to get better.
Yes.
That speaks volumes, right?
Yeah. I think that also goes over really well with people, right? You don't have to be perfect all the time, right? But you have to let him know when you're perfect.
And the communication streams. How do you actually communicate to the paramedics? Because we all know, like, the email blast, hey, policy 314 has been updated. And, like, no one's going to memorize that or digest it. They don't, that doesn't matter. I forget the percentage, right? It's like 10% actually read. But how do we actually get out this information where paramedics, oh, thanks, you made it as easy as possible. I understand why we're doing this.
Yeah. So I think there's no one silver bullet, and I think you have to, have a variety of tools in your toolkit to do that. So one of the things that I've started and have committed to is sending out a service update at least every month. So there might be some times where we have a couple a month, just, in busier seasons when there's more going on, we send that out, and, it has small tidbits all the way through it, nothing long. Sometimes they do end up, I feel like sometimes we don't have that much to say, and then I get writing them, and then page 4, 5, 6, I feel like I'm writing a manifesto sometimes, but they're at least short points and bullets. But again, not everybody's going to read those all the time. So you got to have different ways of getting out there. So I also try and get out and see the staff, and just even doing base visits. I really like going on vehicles with paramedics and hearing about that. And you get really great information, right? When I was out with the crew, there was something relatively simple, and I asked them, I said, why don't we have this? And they turned to Liberty, and they're like, that's a great question, Chief. Oh, yeah. Okay. So we went and got that thing. But just trying to get out there as much as possible and see the frontline staff and hear from them and try and communicate out messages that we want to get out, right? Like they need to hear it over and over and over again before they're like, oh, okay, we've now heard this from Marc, 7 to 10 times. Yeah, we're likely going to believe this is something that's moving. Hey, and I know for me, sometimes going out and chatting with paramedics, like I've often been dealing with some of this news for 6 months, so it doesn't seem new to me. So it's sometimes a little bit hard, when paramedics are like, hey, what's new? What's new to me isn't new to frontline paramedic. So I find it easier. I'm like, what do you want to know? Ask me questions. That's easier for me to get going.
It's a good point, because you can be working on something for a year or two and we don't know about it. And then it's like, oh yeah, that's already repressed in the back of my mind. But just being accessible for everyone and being approachable, say, hey, ask me, I'll talk to you. And I think that's one of the key things that seems so simple solutions. Like, I'm going to the front lines because you're the professionals and I'm helping you. So tell me what is going on, because I want to understand. That's a good leader to understand that. And I think that frontline perspective is something that can really easily get lost if you don't take an active approach. Yeah, it's really cool to see you're going on base visits and you're on trucks and doing calls with medics. That's a really good approach, I think. Awesome.
We had this scene for quite a while after we had done Just Culture training, and during Just Culture training, they had told a story of, I think it was Crest or some toothpaste company. They kept having empty boxes of toothpaste to make it out of the factory. So they spent millions of dollars trying to come up with an engineering solution. So, multi-million-dollar engineering solution, weighed each box as it was going through the line. If it wasn't the right weight, stop the line. It was a big to-do to get it going again. Anyways, one of the frontline workers on that line went out, bought a $40 fan, set it up on a stool, and it just blew off the empty boxes before it hit the sensor, and it worked perfectly. So Bert's supervisor had gone to upper management and said, Bert's wondering, he's really improved this system that you guys put in. but he's wondering if he can get his $40 reimbursed for the fan. And the whole team comes down and looks at this, and they just spend millions of dollars on something they could have fixed with a $40 fan. So the concept's always ask Bert, right? Like, Bert's doing the frontline work. He's probably got a really good solution.
That's like Toyota production system. They have this thing where you pull the cord on the assembly line, and the manager goes right to the frontline worker, and they work together. Okay, what's the problem? Because you're the expert. I need to understand it. Instead of, I know my dad worked at GM. And he goes, you shut down the line. They would be so upset with you. Like, that was a catastrophe. But it's just the flip. Because you're the professional. How can I help you and understand what's going on to give you the tools?
Yes.
So that's a cool story as well. You can always gain knowledge from the front lines. So integrity. That's a big one. I keep hearing that in leadership. And truly, it's like the best people of our organization do what they say they're going to do and do it to the highest standard. It's like, I'm here to help you. Do you think that's a skill that's easy to develop through experience and self-reflection? Hard, right?
That's a hard one. I think it ought to be. I think it depends kind of what examples you might put forth, right? There's going to be some relatively easy things that are there's a clear right and wrong. There's other times where it's not as clear, or sometimes leaders have to make a decision between really like two bad choices, right? Which one is not as good? But I mean, when I think of integrity, it's like doing the right thing when nobody's looking, right? I don't have a lot of oversight, right? I could do a lot of things that would probably never be caught and may be beneficial to you. But when I think of integrity as well, like if you can't put it on the front page of the newspaper, you're probably making a less than integral decision. But can it be learned and taught? I think so. But I think usually by the time you're at a leadership level, a lot of that's probably already ingrained in you just through your upbringing and your socialization and life experiences to that point. So I think if you're entering a leadership role and not a very integral person right from the beginning, I think that might be a struggle to build that integrity.
Because we always say that it speaks volumes of someone when you put them in a leadership role and see what they do with that. Because it's all depending on their upbringings. That you go pretty autocratic, or you can go, I'm here to help you. I'm a servant as a leader. And just think about that. And just think about the decisions chiefs and any managers have to make. It's like, here's your two options, and none of them feel good.
Yes.
But that's the options. How do you weigh the risk and benefits to all that?
And what kind of leader you are, like, whether you're a serving leader or autocratic, like I wouldn't say those are having to do with integrity necessarily. And some of those leadership skills can absolutely be learned. I really do think leaders can, or people can learn to be leaders, right? I don't think there's this, myth of the born leader, like they were born to lead kind of thing. You can learn to lead. But to go back to your question, how do you make those choices between, maybe two bad decisions? It's hard sometimes. And I try and weigh it out in my own brain. I find it useful to discuss it with people, and maybe discuss is the wrong word. I like to argue, right? So it might be like, Jacob, okay, you take this standpoint, I'm going to take this standpoint, we're going to argue it. And then we're like, okay, now flip, right? I also like to get a very different perspective, right? It's one thing to ask somebody else, but if they have a very similar perspective to you, maybe you're not getting as different perspective from the issue that you need. So I like to also ask, people that I know and trust who do have different perspectives and who can shed a different light on it. And then, sometimes you have to, once you've weighed all that, you got to make a decision. And sometimes where leaders get held up is like that decision paralysis, right? Sometimes you have to make a decision, and it's probably not for a little while you'll see, okay, was that a good decision or a bad decision? And, it's easy to look in hindsight and be like, okay, well, why did Mark make this decision when clearly it went this way, or you could have made that decision and went that way? Well, that's not always obvious in the moment. And I also think you need to recognize when you made the wrong decision and not just stick with it for, well, okay, like I made decision A, I'm not going to stick with decision A because that's what I said. I always try and weigh things as they evolve too, right? Like, much like in academia, we might have an opinion on something based on the current research, but you do more research and like, okay, well, that was wrong. We don't just stick to that opinion. We change our opinion based on new evidence. So you constantly have to be weighing the new evidence to, it's not always going to be a straight path forward. It might be a windy road, and sometimes you're over here in the good side, sometimes you're over here in the bad side, but a lot of time you're going to be somewhere in the middle. And
I think it's interesting how you touch on how hindsight is often 20/20, right? And I think leaders are often judged on not whether the decision they made was appropriate with the information at the time. They're often judged on whether the decision was appropriate 6 months down the line now that everything's come to light.
yes,
And often I think in public opinion, not everything might be your fault, but it's seen that everything is your responsibility.
yes.
So on a personal level, how do you find it's best to manage that type of pressure?
Yeah, it's hard sometimes. And I mean, there's decisions that I've made through my time in leadership that I still look back and wonder, was that the right decision? And, one of the things that I do, knowing that we're going to look back at this, is when big decisions are made, I write it down, even just an email to myself and say, okay, here's what I currently know. This is why I'm making that decision. Because it's really hard many months later to go back and be like, okay, what day, at what point did I know what, right? But at least if you're writing it down, you can kind of make that trail. It's not completely different to, practicing as a frontline paramedic, right? Like, you assess a patient and maybe it's a breathing problem. You hear some wheezes, not much to the base. They have everything, right? So it's kind of like pick a condition. But you treat with Ventolin, and now you listen a little bit later, you're hearing crackles. Okay, well, you don't need to stick with Ventolin. If you reassess that and you're like, okay, well, perhaps it's not an asthma issue. Maybe it's a CHF issue. You can change, right? But again, when you write your ACR, you need to document what you when and go from there.
It's so dynamic. And I think we simplify. It has to be binary. I made the right decision, it has to be right, or I made the wrong decision, it has to be wrong. It's like I can adapt.
Yes.
Because there's so many unknown unknowns. And I'm just thinking, as a chief, you can never turn off. I'm sure you're thinking about it all the time.
Yes.
And that's hard. Because I just think about calls I've done, and you sit up sometimes, and you're like, oh man, I could have been done it. I'm an idiot. But as a chief, you have the whole system to think about.
Yes.
And people.
Yeah. I mean, this to do something that weighs on you and you can't really turn it off, or if you can, I haven't got to that point yet. But I worry about people sometimes too, like especially when you, even just a recent example of the ice storm, right? I'm sitting outside or sitting in my office at my house watching this ice storm and worrying about all the paramedics that are, at work, but also who have to come into work and have to come home from work. And then I'm thinking, okay, well, how are they doing in their personal lives, right? Are they experiencing an emergency that's going to impact their ability to come to work? So I'm worried about all these folks. So even in the ice storm that morning, my wife had acknowledged, like, you have something on your mind. I'm like, yes, I'm thinking about this and this and this. And I said, I kind of want to go in and see the superintendents at very least, make sure we have a game plan. I was also on call that week. So, she's like, just go. Like, go and see the soups. So I went and had a coffee with the soups. They had everything under control. It was probably more therapeutic for me to show up and understand that. But I mean, you're right. It is something I worry about regularly.
I think that's cool to hear, because maybe sometimes it's forgotten the front lines. Like, oh, these guys are at home in their offices while we are struggling through this ice storm. It's like, no, like I care. I'm trying to coordinate what I can with my role.
Yes.
And I do think about it. And that makes me not present with my family. Like, we've all been there. Usually you're all thinking about something. It's like, I got to get something done.
Yeah. I very rarely stay home, especially like using weather events, right? Like if I expect paramedics to go in, I also go in, right? And sometimes it's to my office at the county, sometimes it's to our operational base um, within the city. Because I think you can't expect paramedic to do something that you're not willing to do, right? So I'm not going to stay in my shirt and shorts, like your Zoom uniform, at my desk at home when I expect paramedics to be at work on the front lines too.
Where'd you learn that?
To be honest, I don't think
Because it just shows again those core values. Like, I'm setting an example. If I'm doing it, I expect that from everyone too, but I need to do it first to set the example. Like, that's a good leader.
Yeah, I would never ask somebody to do something that I wasn't willing or had already done myself.
You can see how that gets lost. It's like, I paid my time. I did the ice storms. I'm going to sit back and coordinate, but it's like, no, this bugs me. I care about you. I need to go in to help. So that's interesting because I'm sure you've had some mentors along the way that shaped who you are and your leadership. Give me examples.
Yeah, I think you can learn something from everybody. And that's always a position we took, right? Whether you're learning something good, learning something not so good, there's ways to do it, ways not to do it. But I learned from everything, every situation, every leader. I think back to probably one of my very first leadership lessons was, in high school when I was working at a pool. And, my boss at the time had said something that stuck with me forever. And I think I already alluded to it. It was, leaders need to make decisions. And it's not always going to be the right decision, but once the decision's made, you need to go with it. You can't be in this paralysis mode regularly. So, that was something I learned as a teenager and probably one of the most formative lessons ever. Also because I was kind of in the wrong at the moment too, but I learned from mistakes.
And that's when we learned a lot of this.
Yeah, I learned far more from my mistakes than my successes. And then, every supervisor, every partner, everybody has really great pearls of wisdom along the way if you're listening and open to that and you file that away.
So knowing that that and you have many people looking up to you, does that shape how you approach them and what you say to them?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think more so that I want to share that. And, sometimes, people apologize for, sending me an email or wanting to meet with me. I'm like, no, this is the most important part of my job is to come and meet and reply to your emails.
It's cool.
And it's something hard too, right? So as we were setting up to have our discussion today, I was just remarking to Jacob, like I finally got my emails down to a manageable level because they do get out of control sometimes, especially when you're out, if you're on a vehicle or out doing base tours or in meetings, right? I don't want to be sitting there having a conversation with you and doing something on my phone. Great.
You want to be prepped.
So when you're away from the office, it's just like this constant barrage of emails. So a day out on the road is a day away from the office and nobody's doing my work, right? And so as a frontline paramedic, when you take the day off, right, those 6 to 10 calls, whatever you might have done, like somebody else does those. We don't save those up for you. When you get back and be like, okay, so that, the same amount of calls you did today, you also have to do yesterday's calls on top of that.
Yeah.
So it doesn't take very long for emails to get back down. And I remember speaking with a paramedic once, and I had gone to see them for a clinical debrief discussion, and that went over fine. And they said, I have something else I have a beef to pick with you. I said, okay. And they said, I sent you an email, whatever, like 2 months ago. And this is the summer to give it a little bit of context. I sent you an email a couple months ago about getting a toque. And he goes, well, you never answered me. I'm like, okay, I apologize. And I kind of thought it funny at the time, and it took a lot of self-reflection to really like get to the point where I'm at now, right? Like I'm not the person you email to get a toque. Like one of the furthest from it. And, as I'm triaging emails, sometimes I gave the example. I said, I came to see you. I was on the boat, so they were working on Wolf Island at the time. And I said, I'm going through emails and things that I need to do back at my desk and mark them as unread again. Right. But, it's a slip of a finger to, did you swipe a little bit too far and that it's not unread now. It's actually deleted and you never see that again. And it clips in my mind. And I had talked about that with a leadership coach once. And she talked a lot about your leadership brand. She's like, what do you want your leadership brand to be like? Like, do you want it to be known as the guy who never answers emails? I'm like, no, not at all. She says, that email might not rise to the top of your important list, but it's very important to that person. And that's what I try to remember. Like, I want people to feel important. And, in my list of emails, like some of those personal emails from Frontline Paramedics are probably the most enjoyable to answer. They tend to be a little bit easier, less complicated than some like, bigger, major budgetary items that, take a long time to answer. I want people to feel important and, so I try and work at trying to prioritize that. Despite the onslaught of emails sometimes, but it's hard. Like it doesn't take long to slip and get really far behind.
Because I've been on both sides of that. And I think that's good to note that you're willing to go out and do calls still, even though you're going to double your work because everything's just built up. And we've all been there, especially now I transitioned to an office job. When you send an email initially, it's like, that's my whole world. That's my problem. And you expect them to think about it at the same level as your problem. But you're triaging it. You got multiple problems.
Yeah.
You have no idea what's going on. And you don't hear in a bit. You're like, oh, they're ignoring me. Like, what's going on? But then from being in the office, you get an onslaught of messages. It's like, this is never going to go down.
Yeah.
And I got a million problems to solve and I got to pick and choose what I can and cannot do.
Yes.
At that time. So I like that perspective. But Dan, that's a good point from your leadership coach saying, you don't want to be the person that doesn't respond to the emails, even though it's so easy to mistake an email.
Yes.
So easy. I guess if we zoom out and go back to like a systems level perspective, there's been a lot of changes in the past few years to paramedicine as a whole. And I guess what do you think have been the most impactful changes? And then what kind of changes or advancements do you think we still need to make as a profession in Ontario?
So I was thinking about that and, I think it falls into a couple of different categories. But one of them is just the physical way in which we do the job now. We haven't had power load and power structures for that long at this point, like across the system in particular, right? We've had them in Frontenac for quite some time. But I still watch those stretchers go up and down with the push of a button and it just load nice and easily to the end of. I think that is probably, from a physical demands aspect of the job, that has been such a game changer. And has probably saved countless back and shoulder injuries and career-ending injuries. So I think that's been a huge change. And then, since COVID, really, the pace at which our protocols have changed, medications being added, protocols being added, that pace of change has not been seen in paramedicine really since its inception. So that's really big. And I think there's lots of opportunities there to really start maximizing and, the change of protocols and change in what paramedics can do. I think we need to maximize that because our healthcare system is struggling and we need to maximize what paramedics can do. The treat and discharge, treat and alternate destination, and treat and refer needs to be maximized to help save the hospital. And, if we're thinking about a patient-centric approach, like those are really good for patients, right? Like not everybody needs to go to the ER. No, they might need to go to a walk-in clinic or we need comfort in the moment, or maybe even just treatment in the moment, and then follow up with their primary care. So it's about doing what's good for the patient, but that also translates really well into what's good for the system overall. And I think that's where the biggest focus and change needs to occur in paramedicine. And I think we're moving down that path, but there's also some challenges and some struggles, some hurdles that we're still yet to get over because, you guys are educators as well, right? So we don't spend a lot of time teaching paramedics how to, treat, discharge, treat, maltreatment, decimation, treat, and refer, right? That's not the focus of paramedic training. We probably spend bulk of our time training paramedics for the high acuity and the trauma, the MI, the shortness of breath, things that you actually really need to be good at, right? For sure. Like nobody's going to argue that we shouldn't spend time doing that, but we should also spend time on, lower acuity patients. Like how do you assess that? How do you document that? How, what kind of assessments do you need to be doing for more chronic long-term conditions? And what do you do with those? Because the answer isn't take them to the ER, right? That just causes a whole host of other problems.